After my grandpa died, I flew home for the will reading expecting nothing. I was shocked when he left me his cabin, his boat, and $50,000, until my aunt stood up and screamed. He was senile when he signed that. My cousins demanded a copy of the will, then stormed out. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from a lawyer. They were contesting it. The night before court, I got an anonymous envelope with photos of my aunt in Grandpa's room, shuffling papers and holding a pen in his hand while he slept. I hadn't seen my grandpa in person for almost 10 years. Not because I didn't love him. Life just got busy. After my parents' messy divorce, we moved to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and visits just stopped happening. Grandpa would still call me on birthdays and send letters every Christmas. I kept telling myself I'd make the trip back up to Little Falls, Minnesota next year. But next year turned into next decade. When my mom called me, her voice cracking, and said Grandpa had passed in his sleep, the guilt hit me harder than the grief. I booked a flight that night. I figured I'd just pay my respects, sit through the will reading, and quietly slip back into my life. I didn't think Grandpa had much. He owned a worn-down cabin on Lake Alexander, a rusty old fishing boat, and whatever savings he managed to scrape together after a life of working blue-collar jobs. Grandpa was never about money anyway. He was about Sunday morning fishing trips, whittling wood on the porch, and teaching me how to skip stones across the lake. I expected maybe a photo album or a pocket knife. The will reading was held in a stuffy little law office off Main Street, squeezed between a bait shop and a bakery. The second I walked in, I knew something was off. The room was full. I expected a couple of cousins and maybe my Aunt Colleen. Instead, it was a full-blown family reunion, with people who had barely spoken to Grandpa in years. Aunt Colleen sat front and center in a blue pantsuit like she was running for mayor. Her kids, Mason and Danielle, flanked her on either side. Uncle Jerry slouched against the back wall, tapping away on his phone. Even a few second cousins I barely remembered were there, whispering and throwing side eyes at each other. The lawyer, Mr. Hepler, looked about ready to crawl out of his own skin. After a few minutes of awkward coughing and throat clearing, he started reading. First, the small stuff, Grandpa's old F-150 truck to his neighbor, Rick, who used to drive him to the doctor. His fishing rods to Pastor John from the local church. His coin collection to the local museum. People nodded politely. No one cared about the small stuff. You could feel the tension building. Then Hepler paused, took a big, shaky breath. "And to my grandson, Adam Merritt," he said, looking right at me. "I leave my cabin at Lake Alexander, my 1988 Crestliner boat, and $50,000 held in a savings account." You could hear a pin drop. I blinked. I actually looked around the room to see if there was another Adam Merritt sitting behind me. Before I could even get a word out, Aunt Colleen exploded out of her chair. "This is a fraud," she screeched, pointing at me like I had stolen her purse. "He was senile. He didn't know what he was signing. This is bullshit." Everyone stared at her, stunned. Mason and Danielle jumped up too, faces bright red. Mason shoved his chair back so hard it hit the wall. "We want to see the will. Now." Hepler, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else, handed them a printed copy. Mason snatched it and stormed out, Danielle on his heels. Aunt Colleen stood frozen for a second, breathing like a bull, before she followed them, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. The rest of the reading finished quick after that, but it felt like nobody was listening anymore. People were whispering, exchanging looks. The energy in the room was dark. I flew home the next day thinking, maybe it would all blow over. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, a thick manila envelope arrived at my apartment, sent by express mail from a law office in Little Falls. They were contesting the will, claiming Grandpa wasn't of sound mind, that he had been influenced under duress, that his mental capacity was severely diminished. In short, they were trying to wipe my inheritance off the map. I won't lie, I almost gave up right there. I'm a retail manager. I don't have deep pockets for a long, ugly court fight, especially not against a family member, especially not against multiple family members working together. It wasn't just the money. It was the betrayal. They didn't visit him. They didn't call. They didn't care. But now that there was something to grab, Suddenly, Grandpa mattered again. I didn't know what to do. I was sitting in my kitchen at 2 a.m., rereading the contestation papers for the 50th time, when there was a knock on my door. No one there. Just a manila envelope on the floor. No return address. No note. Inside were a stack of photos. The first photo nearly made me drop them all. It was Aunt Colleen in Grandpa's bedroom, standing over him. He was asleep, pale, frail, mouth open, eyes shut. In one hand, she held a pen. In the other, a thick packet of papers. The next photo showed her guiding his hand across the papers. Another showed her shoving them into her purse. The last one? Her standing by the door, looking around like she was checking if the coast was clear. I don't know who took the photos. Still don't. But someone out there hated what she did enough to get proof and send it to me. The next morning, I called Mr. Hepler. I told him everything. Sent him copies of the photos by courier. By noon, he called me back. "We're keeping the court date," he said, "and we're going to bury them." The hearing was set for 3 days later. I didn't sleep much leading up to it. Kept having nightmares about standing in court and losing everything anyway. The morning of, I walked into the county courthouse wearing the only suit I owned, bought 5 years ago for job interviews. Aunt Colleen and her kids were already there, all smiles. Their lawyer, a smug guy in a $1,000 suit, patted Colleen on the back like they had already won. They looked at me like I was dirt under their shoes. I didn't look back. I just sat next to Hepler, who gave me a tiny nod. Then it began. Their lawyer went first, spinning a tale about Grandpa's declining mental state, confusion, and incoherent conversations. He painted me as some long-lost grandson who swooped in and exploited an old man. My stomach churned. Then it was our turn. Hepler didn't say much. He just walked up to the judge, handed over the photos, and said, "Your Honor, new evidence." The courtroom went dead silent. The judge took one look, raised an eyebrow, then another look. He leaned back in his chair, staring at Aunt Colleen so long the silence got painful. Finally, he said, real slow, "Ms. Colleen, do you have an explanation for these photographs?" You could hear Danielle start crying. Mason's fists clenched so hard I thought he was going to punch the table. Their lawyer stammered, tried to object, but the judge wasn't having it. He dismissed the case. With prejudice. Meaning they couldn't bring it back. Aunt Colleen and her kids slunk out of the courtroom like kicked dogs. I walked out into the fresh air feeling like I could finally breathe again. But I wasn't dumb enough to think it was over. And I was right. At first, I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. It started small. One morning, I came out to find my car windshield shattered. Nothing stolen, nothing else touched. Just a clean, spiderweb crack like someone had taken a baseball bat to it. I filed a police report. They said it was probably random vandalism. But then it happened again. A week later. Different spot. Same exact crack. Then came the letters. Typed, no return address. No fingerprints the cops could find. Just words. Angry ones. You stole from your own blood. You're a disgrace. You think that cabin makes you a man? I knew who it was. Colleen. Or maybe Mason. I could feel it. I didn't respond. I didn't tell anyone, not even Hepler. I just quietly installed cameras around my apartment. One in my car, too. Got some motion lights and started locking everything up twice. Then things got worse. One night, I drove up to the cabin just to get away for a weekend. I hadn't been there since the court case. Thought maybe I could get some peace. Instead, I found the door wide open. Inside, the place was trashed. Couch cushions ripped. Dresser drawers pulled out and dumped on the floor. The photo of me and Grandpa, the one by the fireplace, shattered. Someone had come looking for something. I checked the closet in the bedroom. Gone. Grandpa's lockbox, the one he kept all his personal stuff in, was missing. That was when I snapped. I called the sheriff in Little Falls. Told him everything. The break-in, the contestation, the photos, the letters, the car damage. They opened an investigation. For weeks, nothing. Then I got a call from the sheriff. They found the lockbox. Guess where? Buried in a storage unit registered to Danielle. Inside, it was mostly personal papers, old fishing licenses, his birth certificate, some family photos. But there was something else. A second copy of the will. An older one. In that version, Grandpa left everything to Colleen. No cabin. No boat. No money for me. It was dated 6 months before he passed. But the will he signed, the one I got, was dated 2 weeks before his death. That was the twist. Everyone had assumed Colleen had tried to fake the final will. But the photos showed her trying to make him re-sign the old one. She had known about the change, and she couldn't live with it. The sheriff brought her in for questioning. I don't know what she said, but I know what happened next. The story made the local news. Daughter accused of pressuring dying father to alter will. She didn't get arrested. They didn't have enough to press criminal charges. But her name? Ruined. Her job at the hospital? Gone. Danielle's college scholarship? Revoked. Mason? Got caught slashing a tire at my apartment complex. Arrested for vandalism. Their lives? Spiraling. I should have felt relieved. But all I felt was this quiet, cold anger. They couldn't take what Grandpa left me. But they tried to. They tried to erase me. And I knew this wasn't the end yet. Not for me. And not for them. 3 weeks after Mason got arrested, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was late, just after midnight. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. Adam? The voice said. It was shaky, tired, familiar. It was Uncle Jerry. I hadn't heard a word from him during the will battle. He'd always been the quiet one. The kind of guy who just faded into the background and let louder people take the hits. But now, here he was, calling me out of the blue. I need to talk to you, he said. In person. I agreed. We met at a diner just outside of town the next day. He looked rough. I sunken. Nervous. Like he hadn't slept in weeks. I stayed out of it, he said. All of it. The will, the fight, the court. I didn't want to get dragged into your aunt's mess. I just stared at him, waiting. Then he said something that changed everything. Your grandpa didn't just change the will. He made a video. He wanted you to see it if things went bad. A video? Jerry slid a flash drive across the table. He asked me to hold onto it. Told me only to give it to you if Colleen tried to fight the will. I didn't think it'd actually happen. But it did. I didn't say anything. Just grabbed the drive and left. When I got home, I plugged it into my laptop with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The screen went black for a second, then flickered. And there he was. Grandpa. Sitting on the porch of the cabin in his old flannel jacket, sun setting behind him. He looked tired. Thin. But clear. Alert. Hey kid, he said. If you're watching this, it means they tried to take it from you. He took a deep breath. I changed my will because you're the only one who ever gave a damn. You called. You visited. You didn't come around asking for anything. Just wanted to be here. He paused. I know Colleen. I know what she's capable of. She already tried to get me to sign the old version again. That's what the papers were. I pretended to be asleep. Thought she'd give up. He laughed, dry and bitter. But she didn't. Not then. And probably not now. Then his face got serious. If she keeps pushing, go to the cabin. Check under the floorboards in the bedroom. Near the closet. You'll find the rest. The video ended. I sat there for 10 minutes, not moving. Then I got in my car and drove to the cabin. It was 2 a.m. by the time I got there. I pulled up the floorboards like he said. Tucked underneath the wood was an old shoebox wrapped in duct tape. Inside? A notebook. A bunch of receipts. And a voice recorder. I pressed play. His voice filled the room again. He talked about Colleen showing up one night, uninvited, demanding he reconsider the will. About how she screamed at him when he refused. How she left. Then came back days later with papers in her bag and Mason in tow. She's desperate, he said. She wants it all. And then, at the end of the recording, if anything happens to me, if I die suddenly, you make sure someone hears this. Don't let her get away with it. I had everything now. Proof of her pressure. Her manipulation. Her lies. But something still didn't sit right. Who took those photos? Who sent them to me? And why didn't they come forward? The answer came in the mail a few days later. Plain envelope. Inside was a single Polaroid of Grandpa sitting on the porch. Next to him, a man I didn't recognize. On the back of the photo, written in shaky ink, he knew I was watching. B. I stared at the back of that Polaroid for hours. He knew I was watching. B. The handwriting looked old. Like someone hadn't held a pen in a long time. B didn't match any name in the family. I went to the sheriff again, told him everything. The flash drive, the voice recording, the hidden shoebox, the Polaroid. They opened the case again. And this time they dug hard. They pulled financial records, phone logs, security footage from the gas station near the cabin. Anything and everything. Then, about 2 weeks later, I got the call. The sheriff asked me to come in. When I got there, he had a look on his face I'll never forget. "We found B," he said. I blinked. "Who?" "Name's Bruce. Bruce Danvers. Your grandpa's old army buddy. Turns out he moved into the woods behind the lake years ago. Lives off-grid. Comes into town maybe once a month. Your grandpa was the only one who still visited him. Couldn't believe it. Bruce saw everything," the sheriff said. "He took the pictures. Said he didn't trust Colleen. When he saw her sneak in with papers and a pen, he started snapping photos with an old camera. Then slipped the prints into your building himself. Didn't want to get dragged into court, but figured you'd need help." They tracked Bruce down at his shack. When he handed over the rest of his photos, the case became a damn mountain. Colleen got arrested 2 days later. Charges: attempted fraud, elder abuse, and evidence tampering. The DA had her dead to rights. Danielle? She'd helped with the break-in. They had her on camera near the storage unit. She tried to lie about it, but they had her fingerprints inside the lockbox. She got charged with breaking and entering and conspiracy. Mason? He pled guilty to the vandalism and got community service. But the judge warned him. One more mistake and he'd be seeing the inside of a jail cell. Their lawyer abandoned them the moment charges hit. I heard through the grapevine that Colleen had to sell her house to cover legal fees. Danielle moved back in with her mom, which meant they both now lived in a tiny apartment across from a Dollar Tree. Mason? He dropped out of college and started washing dishes at a sports bar. And me? I didn't come out clean either. The fight had changed me. I wasn't the same guy who walked into that lawyer's office thinking it would be a simple goodbye. I became someone angry, paranoid, distrustful. I lost sleep for months. Lost friends too. Some didn't understand why I kept pushing. Said I should have let it go for the sake of family. But family doesn't steal from the dying. Family doesn't fake love for inheritance. And Grandpa didn't just leave me money or a cabin. He left me a truth that tore everything wide open. The last time I went to the cabin, I sat on the porch with the notebook in my lap, the lake in front of me, and Grandpa's voice still saved on my phone. The truth had cost me more than I expected. But it cost them everything. And that was worth it.